Play Your Role is a proud affiliate of Only Crits Dice. Check the link in the description for beautiful hard-edged dice sets as well as a coupon code in order to be able to get 15% off your next order. If you want amazing high-quality tabletop products as well as to support the channel, please go ahead and check it out. Enjoy the video. So I recently released a video talking about how to play a character who has some sort of disability, and there was a lot of fun conversation with that. I really enjoyed the comments, but one of them in particular really caught my attention, and that was somebody asking me to talk about how to play somebody with an injury mechanically. What happens when you have something like a quirk or an injury or a scar or something that affects your character in a mechanical way? Disadvantage on a roll, or perhaps a negative modifier to something. And that was interesting. By the way, if you want to check out the disability video, it's up in one of these corners, and never remember which one it is, but you can go check that out. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into what I think it looks like to play a character like that, and how to do it properly without screwing yourself or the party over, and making it fun and interesting. So let's talk about that. Before I get into the brunt of the video, I do want to say I usually parse most of my video ideas from the comments. It's really important to me to communicate with you guys and to get your ideas, and you guys have a lot of really good ones that I wouldn't have thought of. However, I have noticed that I respond to a lot of them hoping to make a video, but a lot of the times I just can't get to all of them. So if I have done that to you, I apologize. Continue to comment those ideas. I will try and get them as I can. I usually get about 20 to 30 in a week, and frankly, since I only make 3 videos in a week, it's a little difficult to do, but hopefully you understand. Now, that being said, let's jump into the topic of the video. Playing a character who has a mechanical issue. Somebody who literally has an injury or disability or something that's wrong with their head that literally affects score-wise. Now, I have seen the argument before that it is offensive to people to put a negative modifier onto something if you have a disability. It's offensive to people with that disability. And I'm not going to specifically touch on that. I don't have something like that, so I'm not going to try and throw my hat into the ring. I would just like to put that out there because I know there are some people who have that opinion. That being said, if I personally were dealing with something like that, I think it would be a little offensive to me to assume that it wasn't an issue. If I'm struggling through something and I'm overcoming it, I want that to be recognized, not for people to pander to me and assume, hey, he doesn't have to deal with anything, he's just like the rest of us. Take notice of the things that people are overcoming, because it takes strength. It takes power and ability to be able to do that, and perseverance. Don't downgrade what it is that they're overcoming. But that's a side tangent. Let's talk about mechanical penalties. So say you're an adventurer. You're a great adventurer and your campaign uses a few homebrew rules. For example, say you have the critical injury rule, where if you take a certain amount of damage in a single round, you gain a critical injury. And you roll on the critical injury table and oh, well, there it goes. That giant crocodile just ate your arm off. Okay, that's gonna have some mechanical issues. If you are a user of a bow, your DM's gonna be hard pressed to explain how you're using that bow if you're missing your arm now. And this is where we get into negative modifiers. There have been many people I've seen who have taken intentional negative modifiers. For example, I've seen people play the Drow, and the Drow gets disadvantaged on perception checks when they're in bright light because, you know, they have dark vision. They are used to being underground. And that's just built into the class, but it is a great first initial example. I've seen people do that, and they've done it a few different ways. They've tried to circumvent that by inventing sunglasses or having a hood over their head, and I think that's something realistically somebody would do. Not necessarily invent sunglasses, but have a hood over their head and try to protect themselves. But say you're missing an arm, you have a bum leg, you have an eye missing. A lot of the time, some people would like that to affect their actual mechanics. And I can't say that I'm above this. I've talked many times on this channel about D'Artagnan, my gunslinging artificer. And there was one point in the entire game where he ended up shooting one of his allies. It was pretty early on in the campaign, actually. And after he did that, every time he used his gun, his arm would shake. And he actually had a mechanical arm that he had built for himself. And so he assumed that it was his arm that was causing the issues. And he would constantly tinker with it and constantly fix it. Over a giant course of the campaign, he was constantly trying to fix that arm. But he never realized there was an F thing wrong with it. Instead, he was traumatized from having shot his friend. And so I asked the DM, every time I use this gun, can I have disadvantage on the attack roll? Every time I try to fire, can I get disadvantage? And he said yes, though he fought me on it because he thought I had already given myself enough penalties because I'm the type of player who always gives myself penalties. But it was interesting because then I rolled with disadvantage. Now, it didn't ultimately mean much because my character could get up to a plus 22 on their attack roll. We were using a lot of homebrew, and that campaign was much more about the story than the mechanics. We were just goofing off. But it was something interesting to take into account. So I am the type of person who would do this, which makes the next point of what I'm about to say a little interesting. I don't think you should take mechanical deficiencies on your character. Now, that's not to say you should just treat what you have as if it's no problem. If you're missing a leg, if you have a bum leg, if you're missing an arm, that's gonna affect things. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you should just ignore that. But for me personally, and I understand that this opinion may not be popular, and that's totally okay, but for me personally, I like to have those mechanical issues not represented in the mechanics, instead in the roleplay. Like I said, my character's arm would constantly shake, but I had such a high modifier to attack, it literally didn't mean anything. So what did I do? My character would constantly pull out his gun, ready to fire, and pull out a different weapon instead. He gave up using his gun the majority of the campaign, the one he had a massive modifier on, mind you, and instead chose to use a spear of which he only had a +8 to attack with. And I kept doing that. And so technically, yes, I was imposing a mechanical disadvantage on myself, but the thing is when you genuinely have those mechanical deficits, when you have a negative to something, disadvantage on something, I think it restricts you as a player, because it then puts you in a situation where you have those negatives to those roles permanently, or at least for the consistent majority of the time, and sometimes it doesn't come through how you want. For example, say you have a -2 to perception because you're missing an eye. Okay, that makes sense. However, what if you really want to impose that disadvantage on yourself, especially during an important key moment in the story where you think it would mean a lot if your character is going through an arc of trying to feel like this is not a problem for themselves, and then they miss a perception check and a monster gets past them, but you just keep rolling high. The negative modifier really doesn't do anything. You just keep succeeding on the rolls. I think, personally in my campaigns, it is a lot more interesting to put the power in the player's hands of choosing narratively when this is going to affect them to help their story along. Now, it is still not wrong to impose a negative modifier on yourself, and I will talk about how to do that properly here in a second. However, I just think it's more entertaining to put the power in the player's hands of choosing when this is going to cause them to fail, of choosing when this is going to be an issue for them, because that way it creates a more interesting and unique story. But say you do want to put a negative modifier on yourself somewhere, or you want to impose a mechanical disadvantage. Totally understandable. Sometimes you just want the story and the randomness to decide, okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. If you're going to do that, here's my suggestion. Let other players try and supplement what you can't do until the moment demands it. Let them make the rolls that you can. If you can't make a perception check, well then understand that and let somebody else do it. Or we'll say that you don't have the one eye and you are going to go make a perception check, and you are so stubborn you won't let somebody else do it. Well, in that moment, understand that you're probably going to affect the story in some way. But if you have that deficit, understand you have the deficit. Your character will understand they have the deficit. And if they don't, they will have to learn so. Because it is a real thing, especially if it's affecting the mechanics. The other thing that I would do is talk with your DM. If it begins to become a problem and something that you don't like, or something you feel is letting the party down, address that. Talk with the other players. See what you can do with that. Consider finding a way to supplement that, and I will continue to reemphasize this. If you genuinely think you're letting the party down because you just can't make these roles, consider making a new character. Find one of the other characters at the table who can help supplement it for you. I think that makes one of the most interesting and fun times. For example, I see a lot of people play smaller races, and smaller races don't really have a ton of disadvantages, but when they play smaller races, I notice that they gravitate towards the people playing the larger races, so that they can stand up on their shoulders or sit on their back or be able to see above. Things like that are fun because it creates a connection between characters. So if you have a hard time walking, maybe go over to the fighter and he can help you walk along. Or if you have a hard time seeing, maybe talk to the druid who has a very good perception modifier and begin to supplement that with each other. But use it as a way to create further connections. And if you can do that, you should be able to play some pretty fun times at your table. So go out into the world, make it your own, you beautiful bastards. Don't forget to have a great day, and never forget to play your role down.